Chapter 2 Mazen. When Mazen bin Malik was told his most trusted servant that his older brother would return home for the first hour of sunset, he expected, quite reasonably, for his older brother to return the first hour of sunset. Omar never returned from his hunts in the morning, and it was common for him to spend his afternoons with his thieves. This was why, when Omar threw open the doors of Mazen's bedroom, Mazen was already halfway out the window. As Omar stepped inside, it occurred to Mazen that not accounting for his brother's early return had been a severe oversight. He tried to picture this scene through Omar's eyes. He, the Sultan's youngest son, dressed as a commoner and sneaking out the window of his bedroom in broad daylight. The last time he'd been caught like this, he'd been a child pretending to be an adventurer. He didn't suppose that excuse would be as endearing now, coming from a man of 22 years. Mazen cleared his throat. "Salam, Omar." One of Omar's brows inched up far enough to wrinkle his forehead. "Salam, Mazen. How was your hunt?" "I found both marks." Omar gestured to his clothing. An embroidered tunic tucked into his sarong trousers, held up by a knife-notched belt. The silver gin blood staining his clothes looked more like twinkling stardust than gore. "You sparkle like the moon, brother of mine," Mazen tried to smile. "While I appreciate your flattery, I am more interested in the truth." Omar closed the door behind him. "Perhaps it would be easier to talk inside." "But it's so stuffy inside. Does father know you're sneaking out?" Mazen froze. No, his father most certainly did not know. If he caught wind of this, of any of Mazen's clandestine excursions, he would lock Mazen in his room forever. Being trapped in the palace was bad, but being trapped in his room, Mazen would die. He forced himself to laugh. "I wasn't sneaking out, I was just getting some fresh air." "By hanging precariously out a window." "Not at all. This curtain is surprisingly sturdy." "You must sneak out often, Omar approached, hands clasped behind his back. Mazen glimpsed the knives at his belt and swallowed. The small child in him who still feared his brother worried that Omar might grab one of those knives and slit the curtain. "So what is it? Are you going out to see a woman?" Omar paused at the windowsill and leaned forward, his smile inches from Mazen's face. "Are you going sightseeing? Plotting something nefarious?" "Nothing of the sort." Mazen gripped his makeshift rope curtain tighter. "It's just, I heard rumors that old Ruba was returning to Medine today." Omar looked at him blankly. "You're sneaking out to listen to an old man tell stories." "He's from the White Dunes, Omar." "The White Dunes!" "You know what they say about the sand there? That it's made from the ashes of ghouls who find—" Omar drew away with a sigh. "Leave. Go listen to the old man wag their tongue." Mazen blinked. "You won't tell father?" "It will be our secret," Omar smiled. "For a price, of course." Before Mazen could protest, Omar held up a hand and said, "You have no choice in the matter. Either you pay me for my silence, or I walk out the door and tell the Sultan." Mazen almost forgot how to breathe. A price from Omar. He could not imagine what his brother might blackmail him into, but he would make a dozen deals with Omar before telling the Sultan the truth, that he, despite his father's orders, was leaving the palace without guards, that he, a prince, was walking straight into supposedly jinn-infested streets unprotected. "Remember, Mazen, a favor for a favor. You owe me, Aki." Omar flashed one last smile before stepping out of the room and closing the doors behind him. The ominous smile remained etched in Mazen's mind as he snuck through the palace courtyard. He tried to distract himself by focusing on the wonders of the garden, but their majesty was dulled by his worry. The stone pathways lined with white roses suddenly seemed colorless and mundane, and the exquisite fountain made up of dancing glass figures didn't so much as glint in the sunlight. Even the garden topiaries, shaped like fantastical beasts from his mother's stories, seemed to lack their usual splendor. Mazen passed all these sights like a ghost in his plain tunic and trousers, following the winding garden paths past streams filled with colorful fish and through empty pavilions that sported intricately patterned ceilings. Cushioned benches laid undisturbed beneath the arched roofs and will remain so until later in the day, when the Sultan's counselors took a reprieve from discussing politics to trade gossip. The thought made Mazen tense. He was purposefully planning this outing so he would not be missed by anyone at court. He was confident in his preparations, only hoped Omar kept his word and did not tell their father. Dread weighed his footsteps until he arrived at the servants' entrance, at which point he perked up. The man guarding the silver gate was the one he'd been expecting, and he was able to pay his way past. He tried not to think about how anxious the guard looked when he let him through, or how quickly he pocketed the coins Mazen gave him. We all have our needs. I need to escape, and he needs gold for his soon-to-be-born child. It was, he thought, an honorable exchange. The elevated portion of Mazen that housed the palace and noble quarter was but a small oasis on the plain that formed the city, so it was a simple thing to reach the commoners' souk in the lower quarter. The fields of green fell away to barren dust, the wide cobblestone streets narrowed into paved dirt pathways, and shops were replaced with rickety but charming stalls sporting crudely painted signs. The peace and quiet gave way to the melodic sounds of lutes and drums, and the air filled with smells, musk and sweat, oil and bakur, and a tantalizing mixture of spices that made his mouth water. Merchants marked their shops with bright colors to stand out in the market. Mazen's search for old Ruba's golden tarp took him down paths littered with all manner of stalls, but it was the artist's goods that caught his attention. He eyed ceramic bowls, shatranj, boards, glazed zodiac plates, and then he stopped, eyes snagging on a small but intricate rug that had a series of geometric patterns repeating across its surface. He recognized this design. He had carpet with nearly the exact same shapes on the floor of his bedroom. He looked up and caught the eyes of the merchant behind the stall. A middle-aged woman garbed in red-orange layers, a scrawny young man sat on a stool behind her, watching the souk with glazed, bored eyes. Her son, Mazen assumed. They were for security purposes. Salam ya Saeed, the merchant spoke in a soft voice, barely audible above the noise. Salam, Mazen said automatically. He sidestepped a pair of stumbling singing musicians and planted himself on the other side of the stall. He gestured to the pattern that had caught his eye. Your rugs are beautiful. The weaver's eyes crinkled with a smile. Shukran, though I cannot take credit for this one you're eyeing right now. That is my daughter's handiwork. I only supervised her. She reached out to brush her fingers against the tassels. It was woven from the finest camel hair over many weeks, as we were traveling with our sister tribe through the cliffs overlooking Giban. Tribe. The word sparked a misplaced longing in Mazen. Though his family was descended from wanderers, they had not been nomads for a long time, not in his father's side at least. He wondered what it was like to be able to call the entire desert your home. He smiled. The gods have blessed your daughter with natural talent. This rug reminds me of a carpet I was gifted years ago. It has a similar texture and design. Blue diamonds on white with a crescent moon at the center. I was told it was woven by a master. Ah, that is my pattern, the weaver chuckled. How flattering to be called a master. Mazen reflected her smile back at her. It is an honor to meet you in person. You're quite the charmer, aren't you? I speak the truth, nothing less. He glanced at the rug again, one of the many stunning designs draped across wooden display blocks. He had been able to sneak a carpet back without anyone noticing. He might have done it, but these excursions were not shopping trips. You wouldn't happen to know a storyteller named Old Ruba, would you? The weaver's eyes twinkled. The better question is, who here does not know him? I have not seen him today, but you cannot miss the golden tarp. She raised a brow. If it is stories you seek, these carpets tell tales on their own. Ah, tales I do not have the coin for. The lie was so outrageous it made him cringe. What, you're not even going to try to haggle? To pay anything less than the full price would be an insult, surely. You're lucky you have a gilded tongue. The weaver dismissed him with a laugh and a wave of her hand. Come back when you can praise me with gold rather than words. Mazen gave his promise with a nod and a smile before resuming his search for Old Ruba. When he inquired further, he found out the ship Old Ruba was on, the Asham, had not yet docked. There was nothing he could do but wait, so he made business for himself at a nearby chai shop. He chose a seat at the edge of the establishment, one with a good view of the incoming ships, and ordered himself a coffee with cardamom. While he waited, he entertained himself by making up stories about passerby. The man dressed in multicolored layers was running from his performance troupe, and the men speaking in conspiratorial whispers were illegal intoxicant dealers. The child holding tight to his father's hand and smiling brightly was a foreigner seeing Mazen souk for the first time. His coffee had just been delivered when he caught wind of a conversation from the table beside his, where 5 men sat hunched over their drinks, gossiping like old women. "They say the High Prince brought a jinn back with him." "What, for some ceremonial killing?" Mazen stole a glance at the man speaking and immediately turned away. He recognized him. He was an off-duty palace guard. "Relax," he thought. "He won't recognize you." This was a hopeful, if not entirely rational thought. The only reason the populace didn't recognize him on these outings was because he never wore his royal ornaments. He took off the 3 earrings that marked him as the Sultan's third-born son and removed his mother's scarf. He also took off his gold and silver. But though everything that marked him as a prince was gone, he couldn't hide his features, not his wavy black hair nor his golden eyes. Thus, he was still very much Mazen, baggy beige clothes and all. He didn't suppose the gutra on his head would help him much if they saw his eyes. "Relax. There's no need to draw attention to yourself." He sipped his coffee and promptly choked on it. The guards stopped mumbling to stare at his back. "Today is a cursed day." One guard approached Mazen to ask if he was okay. Mazen tried to laugh and failed. "Fine," he managed. "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern." His heart trembled with panic. "Turn around, turn around!" Thankfully, the man returned to his conversation. "There have been more jinn in the city recently." "More? I thought the High Prince's security measures were meant to keep them out." Mazen gripped his cup. Walking into Mazen was a death sentence for jinn. What reason did they have for invading? "Who needs complicated security measures?" One man waved a dismissive hand. "They ought to have public killings. Bleed the creatures out, then pick the flowers from their blood and give them to the audience. They will scare them away." Mazen thought of the terrible silver blood on his brother's clothing. He wondered where Omar had killed his marks, and what sort of life had sprung from their blood. They had begged his heartless brother to spare their lives, or had they fought futilely until the end? Mazen did not like to imagine them pleading, did not like to think of their lives being cut short with bloodshed. It was amazing, horrifyingly amazing, that the silver blood spilled in the violent struggle could provoke nature into existence. Unlike human blood, which only ever signified loss, pain, absence. Unbidden, Mazen recalled the last time he'd seen his mother. It had been 10 years ago. He'd only been 12 years old. He remembered she had been sleeping, or he believed. He'd gone to deliver a message from his father and found her lying limp on her bed, staring blankly at the ceiling with a crimson stain on her chest. Mazen breathed out slowly as he forced the memory away. Every once in a while, it resurfaced with a vengeance. A jinn had killed his mother. It was the reason his father forbade him from leaving the palace without guards. He lifted his head, desperately seeking a distraction. He did not have to look far. Only feet away, a woman stood frozen in the crowd, smiling at him. She was tall and fine-boned, with generous curves and long legs, accentuated by the thin layers of silk and gossamer she wore. This desire flared in the pit of Mazen's stomach as he took in her radiant appearance. As he looked into her hypnotizing eyes, which shifted color in the light, fading from coffee black to amber, vaguely he recognized that the lascivious shudder running through him was unnatural, but the more present part of him did not intend to think about it. The woman fluttered her lashes, turned, and walked away. Some strange tension hung in the air like a taut string, and snapped. Mazen stood, a slow smile stretching his lips as he followed the goddess into the chaos of the souk. Because what else could she be? He had never felt such a deep concupiscence take hold of him. Of course he had to follow her. He had to make her mine.